Thank you very much. Ronan and Gary have just come back from an expedition to Mexico where they were looking in some very deep caves. I don't know what they were looking for, but they went down these caves anyway. They never did tell me. But unfortunately, when they were in these caves, they ingested some fungal spores that have affected their mental state. These spores are burrowing into their brains, and now they are both convinced totally that they are witches. They have come up on stage today to poke a dead owl with a stick for 45 minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
now, to give this lecture a full Irish flavour, I was going to deliver it in the Irish language, with which most of you will be familiar, I have no doubt. But then I thought some people mightn't understand, so I'm going to do it in my best West Cork accent. "'Tis delighted I am to see you all here this evening. Church is fair, you're all looking, and I can see you're all due for a good long life. Now I have here Mr. Gary Cunningham, and you don't get people like Gary Cunningham very often, thank God. You don't get people like Gary Cunningham very often, because he's one of those cryptozoologists who goes out into the wilderness and treads through the bogs. He's a great one for the bogs. And he is the kind of person who really does all the work. I just write it down. But he has done particular research into lake monsters and the master otter, as it's called in English, known in Irish as the duvarhu. He's also looked for miniature wolves, and those are his fields of speciality. I'm going to ply him with questions. After that, you can ply him with questions, but he's of a timorous nature, so don't ask him anything too difficult. Mr. Cunningham, do you mind if I call you Gary?
Not at all.
You call me Mr. Coghlan and we'll be fine. What are you laughing at? Silly old goat. Now, the thing is that not a lot of people are really aware of just how much of a wilderness the west of Ireland is. There are lakes there that nobody visits, not even fish. And they are in such remote places because the land in their areas is relatively poor. Farmers who once farmed it have long abandoned it, and they have always had traditions of strange things in lakes. What sort of strange things, pray tell?
Well, creatures that they're certainly unidentified, and they're even as long as maybe 30, 40 feet in some instances, four-limbed, small head, reminiscent of other lake monsters around the world, certainly, and many humps, quite a flexible backbone it seems, and those are the sort of animals that are seen particularly in the west of Ireland, and particularly in the western region of County Galway, which is known as Connemara, which has incredibly rough, I don't know if anybody's actually obviously counted every single lake, but and some are actually lakelets, but talking about roughly over 300. Some areas are particularly sort of studded with, interspersed with lake. It's hard to tell what's land, what's water on occasion.
And these humps, are you sure they're not swimming camels now?
Definitely not.
No.
Are they slimy or furry or scaly, and do they have mermaids' tops?
Well, they actually...
a bald man in the audience has just interrupted with a question, yes?
Well, they generally would be smooth. The skin would be quite smooth, and the smooth texture similar to an eel. I suppose that's because they're just trying to... anybody local that has seen any of these animals would try and equate liken the skin texture to whatever they're familiar with, which would obviously be eels and fishes and etc. But I say it's quite very, very strange.
Actually, these traditions of lake monsters go back to the Middle Ages, and we have fully documented cases, including a great deal of new information that you won't find in any other reference book on cryptozoology. So it's well worth forking out the exorbitant price we're charging for it. Apart from that, though, you are interested, are you not, in the Duvaku? Now, I should perhaps explain the Duvaku is a gigantic otter. Supposedly, it lurks in Irish lakes. Occasionally, it stops lurking and comes out and causes havoc. You know of a case that caused havoc, I take it?
Yeah, well, it's well documented that there was a case, there was a woman called Grace Connolly or McLaughlin, and she lived on the shores of a lake called Glenade Loch, which is between Hamilton and Bundoran, between Leitrim and Donegal. And in 1722, she actually was washing her clothes by the lake shore, or bathing.
Hygienic woman.
Or bathing, as some accounts refer to, but she was actually, when she failed to return, her husband went out looking for her and found her lifeless body with a Dover coup on top that had obviously slain and killed her, mauled her to death. So he went back and with the aid of his brother, a man called Gilmartin, they killed the Dover coup, and its dying cries, its death throes actually alerted its mate. And that animal pursued the two men over roughly 20 miles of quite mountainous terrain, quite hilly terrain, to a place called Cashel Garden Stone Fort. In some accounts it's called Cashel Garden Hill, but it's actually a stone fort called Cashel Garden. And they eventually killed it. And to this day it can be viewed upon as a fanciful legend and an interesting piece of folklore, but to maybe sort of heighten the area and sort of enhance the local sort of stories, etc. But there is actually physical evidence in the form of her gravestone, which still exists to this day, and on it is carved an animal which is very akin to both. Yeah, I'd like to. Ronan, are you in charge?
Well, I'm not in charge, but can you get a picture of a gravestone with an otter on it somewhere?
That's it, no?
Yeah, there might be a more close-up version.
Yes, that doesn't look terribly otter-like to me. That's the signpost to the place. You can see how frequently it's visited.
Quite a problem.
Very likely.
I've got your picture of it if you want.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Well, there was one there actually.
I'm just well.
Yeah, before sorry. Yeah, that's I don't know if it's.
That's the gravestone actually, with a bit of the back end of the otter sort of sticking out. I think it's the back end. Difficult to tell the front end from the back end in ancient engravings. Even more dangerous if you can't tell the front end from the back end of an otter, but still. Now, the thing is, these fearsome animals are still seen, still reported. They prowl about. Full accounts of this will be found in our thrilling volume. I don't see anything to laugh about. Here are poor unfortunates who are having horrendous experiences with giant otters. I don't know, but...
Go easy on Guinness.
We've got your, do you want the picture? The artist's rendition.
Yeah.
Well, certainly.
yes, stop there.
That's not the artist's impression, that's the one in the top.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a stuffed one, which is possibly a master otter and possibly an oversized ordinary otter in a pub. But I can tell you the book is crammed full of fascinating illustrations like that. No library can afford to be with. Where's the Reading Library? You'll have to order at least 6 copies for that. Nobody's bookshelf should lack it. It goes very well with ornamental Chinese statues on a bookshelf, I can do that. There's the artist's impression, what it looks like. Well, it looks like an otter, but that is a big otter. It is utterly big, you might say. Now, the third thing that Gary has specialized in is the Achill wolf.
In which Gary specializes.
Bugger off. Now, the Achill wolf, there was long a legend that after the last wolf was killed in Ireland, there were still dwarf wolves to be found in the island of Achill. Gary has consulted ancient manuscripts and long-lost diaries to find out if there's any truth in this. And you too can find out if there's any truth in this by purchasing this exquisite volume. Now, the other thing that Gary likes is the wild cat. You see, there aren't supposed to be any wild cats in Ireland, but there is mounting evidence that the wild cat, the same species roughly as the Scottish wild cat, is nipping about there. And there may even have been another breed of wild cat as well. Gary has gone into wildcats in great depths. He actually found a reference in an American book to a cat house, but I don't think he quite knew what it meant. Anyway, Gary has filled the book with details of this wildcat and the evidence for it. Now, I have tended to keep my areas of interest on the more supernatural type of creatures, werewolves. I was informed by the Irish Folklore Commission that there was no tradition of werewolves in Ireland, and then I dug up a whole lot of stories about werewolves, strange creatures, and also were-eels. Now, you hear about werewolves quite a lot, but I can tell you a were-eel is something to make your brains jangle. But there seems to be a belief that women and women alone can change themselves into these things. Perhaps some of the women here have latent abilities, and if they stood in front of a mirror long enough, they could transform themselves into wolf or eel, or hare. Witches are supposed to transform themselves into hare. If you want to find out about this, I can do no more than recommend this superb book, which can't be beat. He's going to say beaten, you see. But I'm trying to come down to your level. Now, having said all of that, there is also a great deal about the various mythological animals that have been spotted in Ireland, and the various animals nobody can identify. Strange, shaggy, tusked, dribbling things. Some of them are probably people making their way home from the pub at night. And there is a goodly section on that. Now, is there anything else you would like to add?
I don't actually know if I can keep a straight face. Anything. Oh, God.
Well, no, your face wasn't actually straight to start with. He has an interesting cranial curvature. Have you ever noticed that? No, but seriously, folks, there is a lot in this book that you haven't read in other cryptozoology books. You'll be suffering grave intellectual deprivation if you don't fork out and buy it. In days to come, it will be cited in learned bibliographies. It will be cited in learned bibliographies, and some of the pages may even be used in private rooms in the house when people have run out of room. Now, John wants me to be quick about this, and as you know, the words don't come easily to me. Tongue-tied is how I describe myself. So, I'm not going to go on any further. I don't want to give Gary a further complex about his face. If you want a book, you can get a signed copy. If you don't, you're a moron. Thank you for your time.
I would actually like to add something. Give a chance.
My co-author would like to add something.
I tracked down, I'd heard about Lionel Leslie. I don't know if anybody's, assume that people that are cryptozoologically minded would have heard of Lionel Leslie, but they're part of the Anglo-Irish sort of aristocracy, and quite a well-known family. But they, I'd heard that they were very, very strange, obviously because they had so much time and money in their hands, but there was one brother called Shane Leslie who had researched and written about ghosts. Another brother, one of his other brothers was called Lionel Leslie, who was into lake monsters and Loch Ness, etc. And then they had a nephew called Desmond who was into UFOs. So they're a very, very eccentric bunch. And Lionel had written a manuscript, a book that was never published on Irish lake monsters, and dealing with predominantly the Irish phenomenon, but also some references to the similar animals in Scotland. But I never saw publication, so I persisted. As anybody might know me, I'm quite persistent about things, and like a dog with a bone, you know, between his teeth. But
I've seen him with a bone between his teeth.
I persisted, and eventually I was given a large bundle of papers and different sort of manuscripts, etc. Over a year ago, and by one of the members, one of the Leslie family members. And in it happened to be 2 copies of the manuscript of Lionel's unpublished book. And there are, and mentioned within the book also, there's at least maybe 10 or 12 accounts, sightings reported in and around Connemara and near Clifton, which is known as the capital of Connemara. And they've never before been published, until now that is. So I was delighted with that, and as I say, I don't know if the full book, I mean, it's up to the family if they want to ever publish it, so I know you've asked me about that, but it's up to the family what they want to do with it. But it's quite fascinating, and Lionel was there's references to his humour. Lionel had quite I suppose, an Irish sort of dark sense of humour, and there's some references to it in that as well, you know, so I just wanted to add that.
Well, as you probably know, I started a series called Mystery Animals of Great Britain. And before you two Irishmen start rising your hackles and beating me to death with sticks, I started the Mystery Animals of Great Britain a few years ago. And it was pointed out to me by Ronan, and I said, hey, would you fancy doing the Mystery Animals of Ireland? That, from a marketing point of view, would probably be better, even though British Isles, even though Ireland is technically part of the British Isles, it would be better to call it Mystery Animals of Ireland. And he said, he said he'd like to write it. At the same time, I spoke to Ronan, I spoke to Gary, and I must have forgotten that I'd spoken to Ronan, because I said, would he like to write one? And I was landed with the idea that basically I've got 2 authors writing the same book, and as they are both very adept researchers, very funny men, I thought it was a good idea to put them together and see what happened. And I'm very, very pleased with the result. It's an absolutely smashing book. And we are selling it at a discount, and we have, I think, we sold some already, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 9 copies left. And we are going to sell it at a quid cheaper than it is usually, as signed by these 2.
And that's 2 signatures now, not just 1.
In fact, if you want, you probably have a 3rd signature as well, if you can think of something arcane to write. So ladies and gentlemen, come on and make yourself an orderly queue. Don't all start at once. Ah, Miriam. Is this for you or for the library service?
It's for me.
There's actually some people going to look at this.
Okay, Karina. Okay, then.
How many people in the queue?
How many did you say, John?
6, 9, 3 more behind me.
Caroline.